Solve quadratic, I'm just going to abbreviate that, equations by factoring. So let's do a comparison of what a linear lines. We know how to graph lines. So let's talk about a linear equation. Like, what is the difference? Because we're going to do the equation part, then we're going to do the function part. That's when you put it on graph paper. So linear equation and linear function. Now, here's one of the main things. When you have an equation, up here, down here, you're solving it. You solve equations and you graph functions. So that helps. You're graphing something on graph paper. Now, linear equation is just an equation that has one answer. You want just a baby one? X plus 7 equals 8. Let's put 10 there. It has one answer, one solution, and it has degree 1. I'm going to write that. Now, you may not know what that's talking about, but it's going to be important to us here in just a minute. It's the, well, I'll tell you what it is. It's the exponent of the x. It's that right there. That x is x to the 1, understood. That's what that degree is. So a linear function is y equals mx plus b. Now you know we can write it f of x, but it's still y equals mx plus b. It has a slope. It graphs a line. Okay, so that's the difference between equations and functions. A quadratic equation. So we're starting with the equations. A quadratic equation is of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, comma, a can't be 0, comma, with always, underline, 2, underline that, solutions. The degree is 2. Now let's talk about a property that probably goes back to middle school. I don't know when. I mean, I think you know it's true. Everybody, when I start saying it, they know what I'm asking, but I don't know where we really call it that. If a times b equals 0, comma, then is there a conclusion that you know about a and b? Then a, and I mean, I think most even kids that know their multiplication tables could tell me that. Then a equals 0 or b equals 0. Now, both of them could be 0, but they don't have to be. That or is important. It doesn't have to be both of them. It can be one of them. X squared plus 5x minus 14 equals 0. So already it jumps out at me and it says I have a squared in me. It is an equation because it has an equals. And everybody thinks that 0 is not important, but that 0 is a number, just like 2 or 3 or whatever. Like this, x plus 10 equals, x plus 7 equals 10. If you have x plus 7 equals 0, you subtract 7 and you get x equals negative 7. So that can be a 0. This has to be a 0 for you to be able to work it. Now, let's go back to factoring. And be sure and put your equal 0. That's what everybody wants to drop off because they forget what we're doing. It's lesson 16. Yeah, you knew it because you were working on 18. Now, I'm not going to get crazy with GCFs. And a lot of those in that lesson 18 had GCFs in them. We're just looking at basic factoring. So here I am. I got a trinomial. I've got x, and these will all factor. So x squared's got to be x and x. And if I have a minus, I know one of these is going to have to be plus and one a minus. Factors of 14 are 1 and 14 or 2 and 7. Now, is there any way you can put any of those numbers together as 5, positive 5? Or let's just say 5 first. So it's got to be the 2 and the 7, right? So which way would a 2 and a 7 give you a positive 5? Negative 2, positive 7. You've got to find its answers. Okay, you told me if I have two things multiplied together, that one of these has to be 0. These are two things multiplied together. Parentheses mean multiplication. So right on here, then x minus 2 equals 0, or, put your or there, x plus 7 equals 0. That's just now a little linear equation, like this. See, it's just a little baby equation. Plus 2, I get x equals 2. Circle that. That's one of your two answers. Subtract 7, you get x equals -7. There's the other one. Now, what does that mean? That means that if I put 2 up here, that 2 squared plus 10 minus 14 is 0. And it is, because 4 plus 10 is 14, minus 14 is 0. That means, but you put or because it can't be both of them at the same time. I can't put both of those up there. But if I put -7 there, I get positive 49 minus 35, which is 14, plus 14, minus 14 is 0. So these have two numbers that work in them, where we've always just found one answer when it was degree 1. Here's the big hint. See the power of the x? That's how many answers you have. After Christmas, when we have x cubed, it's going to have 3 answers. When we have x to the 4th, it's going to have 4 answers. That is a basic rule all the way through math. Number 2. 7m squared plus 41m plus 30 equals 0. Now, Ms. Brown, are they always going to look like this? See, we said ax squared plus bx plus c. It's going to have an x, in this case m. It's going to have m squared, m, no variable, equals 0. Well, sometimes you have to make it look like this. Now, how do I know it's quadratic? Because it has a squared. I'll ask you that a lot. And how many answers does it have? Quadratic always has 2 answers. If it's degree 2, it has 2 answers. I want to say 17 is where you could look on these. We like 7m squared because it can only be 7m and m, right? Isn't that it? 1 and 7? And then by all positives, make everything positive. Now here's where it gets a little yucky. 30 can be 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, or 5 and 6. Now, I would always tell you to try the one you would know best from your multiplication tables. That doesn't mean it's always going to be it, but I'm going to try 5, 6 first. Now, if I put a 5 here and a 6 here, that would be 5 and 42. Well, now, will 5 and 42 give me 41? No. So let's put the 5 here and the 6 here. Work. Check the O and I. You've got 7m squared. You've got that part. You've got the plus 30 at the end. Now, does 6m plus 35m give you 41? Does it? Okay, now, you've got to get that part factor right. Now, the zero product property says if two things, and I'll go ahead and tell you, 3 things, 4 things, 5 things, if you have a bunch of stuff, A times B times C times D equals 0, one of them has to be 0, guaranteed. So, write on your paper, 7m plus 6 equals 0, or m plus 5 equals 0. So, let's solve this one. Subtract 6. I get 7m equals -6. Now, how do I get m by itself? How do I get rid of that 7? Divide by 7. And so I get m equals -6/7. It's still rational. It's a repeating decimal if you punch in your calculator, but we're going to leave them fractions. They're a whole lot easier. You want them reduced. And I'm not going to do the arithmetic, but I can guarantee you, if you square that, multiply it by 7, and put it right here, it's going to equal 0. It'll end up being 0 when you plug it in. Or, and I only write or one time, then m plus 5 equals 0, subtract 5, and you get m equals -5. 2 answers every time. D squared plus 10d plus 25 equals 0. Okay, let's go ahead and factor. Equals 0, don't forget that, D and D. Okay, everything's positive, we love that. And we need factors of 25 that will give me 10 in the middle. Well, 25 is only 1 and 25 or 5 and 5. And which two give you 10? 5 and 5. Now, as silly as it looks, we're going to write d plus 5 equals 0 or d plus 5 equals 0. I know that looks weird. Subtract 5, d equals negative 5. Subtract 5, d equals negative 5. Now, I can promise you that some, and most textbooks will say the answer is negative 5, but Ms. Brandon, you said that it has two answers. It does, they just happen to be the same. Even if you get two answers and on the ACT it says just negative 5, that they just don't tell you how many of them. I like to list them both. That's just me. Now, the question might come up is, what if it's not in the form you want? Let's do m squared minus 15m plus 60 equals 4. And we'll finish here. Now, here's the big deal. It's got to look like this. Okay, you've got to have equal 0 on one side, and I prefer it on the right. And this, to factor it, needs to be positive. Needs to be positive. I would not move my 1m squared over here and make it negative. You don't want a negative number. I mean, I say you can do it if you want to, but if you want it to be the easiest, y'all talking about doing things easy and hard. The easiest way is always get your number in front of the squared one positive, and it makes it so much easier to factor. But I can't factor it until I get rid of the 4 and get it over here. So I have to move it. So I have m squared minus 15m plus 56 equals 0. So you have to get it in what we call quadratic form. You've got to get everything on one side. That's the bottom line. Factoring it, m and m. When this is positive and this is negative, they both have to be negative. That's good review for next week. Oh me, 56 is 1 and 50. You may already know what it is. It's 2 and 28. It's 3 doesn't go. 4 goes 14 times. 6 doesn't go. 7 goes 8 times. Now, which one gives you 15? 7 and 8. Equals 0. I preach that and preach that, and people still don't put it on their paper. You can't drop numbers. 0's a number, just like equals 4. So, m minus 7 equals 0, or m minus 8 equals 0. Now, here's what a lot of people say. Well, I know the answer is going to be 7, and I know the answer is going to be 8. I know you know, but I want you to know why. So, I need it at least on this one. And if you don't put it, I'll come back to you and say, show your work. And so, remember, they have two answers.